You know the feeling when you're scrolling through endless listings, trying to figure out which gaming PC actually lives up to the hype and which one will just sit gathering dust? Most of us want something that boots up fast, runs the latest titles without choking, and doesn't force us to shell out extra cash on upgrades a month later. The fear of buying a big spec machine that ends up being a noisy piece of hardware or one that looks great on paper but stalls on the couch with a 40 frames per second load is real. If you're ready to skip the guesswork, you'll want to hear what matters day to day, not just the marketing speak. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the basics. The Skytech Archangel 5 is built around an AMD Ryzen 7 7700X. That chip pushes 4.5 GHz base and can turbo up to 5.4 GHz, which means you'll get solid single-core performance for fast-paced shooters and enough headroom for modern open-world games that lean on multiple cores. Pair that with a 12GB RTX 5070 yes, the newest 7 series generation from NVIDIA, and you've basically got a machine that can push 144Hz at 1080p and still leave room for a 1440p stretch without dipping below 60 frames per second on most titles. But specs only tell part of the story. What really matters is how the Archangel handles a typical gaming night. I set it up in a mid-size bedroom with a 27-inch 144Hz monitor, a mid-tower desk, and a decent pair of headphones. The first thing I noticed was the 360mm AIO liquid cooler. Skytech uses a high-spec radiator that stays quiet even when the CPU hits a 5.2 GHz load in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The fans whirred softly, and the whole system stayed under 70 degrees Celsius during a 3-hour marathon of Elden Ring with all the graphical settings cranked high. That means you won't be battling a constant fan drum while you're trying to listen for enemy footsteps. Storage is another practical win. A 1TB Gen 4 NVMe drive loads games at a fraction of the time you'd expect from an older SATA SSD. I timed the initial launch of Cyberpunk 2077 and it went from 0 to main menu in about 12 seconds, which is a noticeable improvement over the 30+ seconds I'm used to with slower drives. With 32GB of DDR5 6000 RAM, multitasking feels smooth. You can have Discord, a browser with a few tabs, and Steam running simultaneously without the occasional stutter you get on older rigs. Now, let's talk about the things that could trip up a buyer. The first is price. The Archangel 5 lands in the upper mid-range bracket, which is justified by the high-end components but still feels steep for someone just entering the gaming scene. If you're a casual player who mostly hits indie titles or older games, you might be overpaying for horsepower you'll never tap. The second catch is expandability. The case is a compact mid-tower, and while the AIO cooler fits nicely, there isn't a huge amount of extra room for additional drives or a bigger GPU down the line. If you're planning to upgrade to something like an RTX 4090 in a few years, you'll need to check that the case will accept the longer card dimensions. The power supply is a solid 750W gold unit, which is more than enough for the current build, but you won't have spare wattage for a major upgrade without swapping the PSU. Who should buy this? If you're a serious gamer who wants a ready-to-play system that can hit high frame rates on modern AAA titles, especially at 1440p, the Archangel 5 checks the boxes. It also suits streamers who need a reliable CPU and GPU combo without having to tinker with a separate custom loop. The Wi-Fi AC module means you can go wireless if you're not into running an Ethernet cable through the living room. On the flip side, if you're a budget-conscious buyer, a hobbyist who builds a PC for the experience, or someone who only plays older or less demanding games, you'll find more value in a lower-spec build that you can customize yourself. I also tested real-world performance beyond games. I ran a quick video rendering test in Adobe Premiere Pro on a 1080p project with multiple layers. The render time was roughly 40% faster than my previous 1080t rig, which tells you the CPU and GPU combo is not just for gaming but can speed up creative workflows as well. However, the system does not come with any bloatware. Skytech stripped everything down to Windows 11 Home, so you'll need to spend a few minutes installing your preferred drivers and any extra utilities you like. That's a tiny price to pay for a clean start, but it's worth noting for those who expect everything to be ready out of the box. One subtle downside I ran into was the cable management. The internal layout is decent, but the power and data cables from the SSD to the motherboard can look a bit messy if you're particular about aesthetics. It's not a functional issue, the PC runs fine, but if you plan to showcase the build inside a glass case, you'll want